For 13 years, I've checked the satellite images of a disturbing house on Google Maps. I won't tell you where to look, unless you want something terrifying to look back at you. When I first spotted the house in 2012, it wasn't disturbing. It was curious. I was 16, wasting time on Google Maps, scrolling over England with a squeaky mouse wheel. Villages dissolved into quilt squares of greens and browns, roads braided and unbraided. Most rooftops formed a repeating pattern you stop recognizing as individual places. The map became wallpaper, except for one. A detached red-bricked house with a long garden stitched to farmland. On the lawn, a T-shaped shadow stretched as if someone had pinned night to the day, like an oversized scarecrow. But satellite photos are usually taken near noon, when shadows crouch close to the things that cast them. Arms shouldn't reach outward like that, like a crucifix. It couldn't be a person. And the angles, the posture, didn't feel like a scarecrow either. It felt posed, mean somehow, intentional. In 2016, I was at Oliver's flat, which always smelled faintly of solder and instant coffee. He collected old laptops the way other people collect shells. We passed a bottle of cheap vodka and traded the internet's favorite hauntings: grainy ghosts, vanishing hikers, impossible reflections. Mystery switched him on. He loved puzzles that didn't want to be solved. The old image surfaced in my mind, uninvited. I pulled up the house. My skin prickled. There were two shadows now, the original long T, and beside it a smaller one, as if a child were copying its parent. Oliver leaned in, his frown clean and surgical. "That's strange." "Probably a statue," I said, though it sounded flimsy. "Or some weird garden thing." He shook his head slowly. "No, that's deliberate. Too deliberate." I laughed because the room wanted laughter. Oliver didn't. He studied the image like a confession. I watched something catch inside him, a hook in soft tissue. When he finally looked up, his eyes had the distant shine of someone who already knows he won't sleep until he understands. That was the night the house stopped being my curiosity and became his obsession. 3 years later, we were pretending to talk about other things when Oliver said, "You remember the house?" His voice was casual. His eyes weren't. We pulled up the image. Before it loaded, I knew. The smaller shadow had grown. The two were equal now, twin T-shapes thrown across the grass. Oliver's hand trembled on the mouse. The baby scarecrow grew up. He tried to grin. The sound he made wasn't a laugh. It was a hinge that needed oil. Then he turned his phone so I could see the blue route line of a map. 52 minutes. "You're not serious." "Of course I am." He held the phone like proof of faith. "We've circled this for years. Don't you want to know?" "No," I said, sharper than I meant. "Not anymore." But his obsession had already crossed the hedge. I could see it in the way his gaze kept going, past the screen, out of the room, like there was a door only he could see, and it had been open for years. I don't remember agreeing. I remember the seatbelt clicking. I remember thinking my life had split. The sensible version stayed seated on Oliver's couch. The other, quieter, weaker, followed him to the car. We left the sodium glow of the city. Lanes narrowed until the hedgerows framed the road like green jaws. Usefully bent signposts flickered up and vanished. A saint's village, a brown board for an abbey ruin, a white arrow listing miles that felt like warnings instead of distances. A fox walked across our beam without hurry, tail a quiet flag. The air through the cracked window smelled of damp earth and nettles. Oliver gripped the wheel at 10 and 2, knuckles leached white. He breathed through his mouth like a runner finishing the last lap. Every few miles he murmured, not to me exactly, but into the hummed space between us. "You'll see. It's not random." I counted fence posts. I followed a far plane blinking red above a black field. A church spire needled the sky, thin and scolding, then slipped behind us. The silence inside the car got heavy enough to bend things. The indicator sounded too loud. The engine felt wrapped in wool. The closer we drove, the more it seemed like sound itself didn't want to enter wherever we were going. We stopped on a lane that wasn't quite a road and wasn't quite a track. On one side, a hawthorn leaned into the hedge. On the other, the house. It looked ordinary. Red brick, slate roof, 2 upstairs windows like cautious eyes. But the hedges were monstrous, 8 feet at least, grown as a deliberate wall, green bricks mortared with thorns. They didn't keep the world out. They kept something in. Nausea climbed my throat. "Unless you've brought stilts," I whispered. "How do we look in?" Oliver's mouth twitched. He popped the boot. Inside lay a white plastic insect. A drone. Relief, no fence climbing, lasted exactly long enough for dread to replace it. We weren't trespassing with legs. We were trespassing with wings. The drone rose, blades whittling the air into anxious sound. Oliver's thumbs moved with reverent precision. We hunched over the tablet as the roof filled the frame. Slate, lichen, a bent TV aerial like a crooked finger, and then the camera tilted down. The garden swam into view. The part of me that keeps you upright when you see something you shouldn't simply sat down. 2 figures. Not scarecrows. Not statues. Humans. Each was tied to a wooden cross. Wrists stretched along the crossbeam, ankles roped to the upright. The bindings had the plain, efficient cruelty of knots tied by someone who knows how to make rope behave. The boy was maybe 14. His head sagged forward, eyes half-lidded, breath scraping shallow. His white shirt was ragged, and through torn fabric and torn flesh ran 5 letters that bled as he breathed. Spawn. Beside him hung a woman in dungarees. For a flicker, my brain lied, told me her sleeves bulged with straw. Then the lie collapsed. She had no limbs, not missing, removed. The ropes cinched the stumps where her arms ended, and the denim there had gone dark. The wood looked rough, utilitarian. This wasn't theater. It was a system. Across her chest, carved through clothing and skin alike, another word: whore. My hand found my mouth. Oliver's jaw trembled, the controller rattling just enough to smudge the image. We didn't scream. Couldn't. The drone hovered and hummed like a hungry insect. Then, a crack. Not thunder. A percussive slap with a hard edge that folded the air. The tablet lurched in Oliver's hands. The video smeared and went black. Somewhere behind the house, our drone fell out of the world. I looked up because my body wanted to know which direction death would come from. The upstairs curtain on the right twitched like a throat clearing. A shape deepened behind it. Broad, heavy in the way of people who move weight for a living. The curtain parted. A double-barrel shotgun slid into the light, those 2 black circles with all the personality of an executioner's eyes. "Move!" I heard my voice crack into something animal. Oliver didn't hesitate. The car lurched. Gravel spat like chipped teeth. The hedge on my side became a flowing wall of green. I folded toward the center console, bracing for glass to explode, for the steering wheel to turn Oliver's face into something ruinous. No shot came. Only the stretched sound of our escape, and then a strangled quiet, like the countryside had put a finger to its lips. We drove. Lanes seemed narrower now. Every farm gate looked like a mouth that might open and swallow us. I kept checking the rear window, tasting a coin's copper, waiting for a bonnet to rise behind, for a glare of headlights, for the full stop of a second gunshot. Nothing. The absence of pursuit felt less like mercy than math. We coasted into a petrol station 20 minutes later. The fluorescent canopy bleached the world to bone. My legs wanted movement and delivered only tremble. The air smelled like diesel and warm pastry. The ordinary 2 notes you only notice right after you thought you were about to die. "We call the police," I said. It came out as a plea. Oliver stared past me at the road. Sweat slicked his temple and traveled to his jaw, fell in neat beads. His eyes did a small, fast thing, corner to corner, forecourt to shop to pump, as if the scene hit a lever. "If we leave," he rasped, "he'll clear it. Burn the wood. Move them. We need proof." "This isn't TV, Oliver." Anger arrived like a shield around fear. "We saw them." We call now his jaw worked. A tendon stood in his neck like a wire. For a second, I thought he'd argue us straight back to the hedge. Then the heat in his eyes cooled half a degree. He nodded. "You're right." Relief let the air out of me. I nodded too, and for a few seconds we were only two people again instead of two broken echoes. "I'll pay," I said. Inside, the shop felt too bright, as if someone had turned the world up a stop. A newspaper headline tried to matter. The cashier raised and lowered the paper in the same motion, a loop you only make when you've lived in fluorescent light too long. I tapped the card machine, missed, tapped again. The beep sounded like a heart normalizing. When the receipt spit out, I looked up, and Oliver was gone. His car wasn't where we'd left it. The space he'd occupied was a rectangle of vacancy, cleaner than the rest of the concrete. I stood there holding my own breath like a bag I'd forgotten to buy. That was the last time I saw Oliver. I called the police from a payphone because my hands wouldn't stop shaking long enough to dial my mobile. The words came out wrong, fractured, desperate. I sounded like every crank caller they'd ever hung up on. "Crucified," I kept saying. "They're crucified in the garden." The desk sergeant's pen stopped moving. "Sir, I need you to slow down." But slowing down meant living in that moment longer, meant seeing the boy's gray face again, the woman's surgical stumps. I talked faster. 2 officers visited Mr. Tomlinson the next morning. They found a garden that looked like it had been groomed by someone who understood the weight of scrutiny. The hedges were trimmed to mathematical precision. The grass showed the kind of obsessive striping that only comes from someone with time and guilt. No crosses, no bodies, no drone fragments glinting in the flower beds. Mr. Tomlinson met them at his gate. 60s, cardigan, the sort of man who waves at postmen. He explained patiently about the art installation he'd removed years ago. Quirky metal sculptures, he said. The kind of thing that looks dramatic from above, but was really quite harmless. "Young people and their drones," he smiled. "Always looking for mysteries that aren't there." The officers wrote neat notes. They walked his garden path, admired his roses, accepted tea. One of them later told me Tomlinson seemed genuinely confused by the whole thing. At the station, they showed me the petrol station footage. There was Oliver, walking to his car while I paid. There was his car pulling away. The camera angle flattened him into someone I barely recognized, a stranger leaving another stranger behind. "Domestic dispute," the sergeant concluded. "He'll be back when he's cooled off." But Oliver's flat stayed empty. His toothbrush dried in its holder. His laptop collected dust in sleep mode. After 48 hours, they opened a missing person file, but their voices had already changed. They were doing their job, not solving a mystery. Then the world ended. Not really, but close enough. Lockdown swallowed everything personal into something global. Search efforts became paperwork. Phone calls became emails, became silence. I learned to sleep in 2-hour increments. In the spaces between, I'd hear machinery that wasn't there. The drone's whine in the central heating, its blades chopping the air inside my walls. I'd see movement in peripheral vision, the boy's chest rising in the kettle's steam, the woman's stumps twitching in the corner of my eye. I stopped opening curtains, but I still checked the locks, again and again, because paranoia has its own arithmetic, and the numbers never quite added up to safe. That summer, 3 notes slid through my letterbox at different hours like coughs in a quiet room. Always when I wasn't looking, morning, tea time, The dead hours after midnight when decent people sleep. No envelope. Cheap paper, edges torn by a hand that liked pressure. Each one placed with the precision of someone who knew exactly when I'd find them. I watch too. Nobody will ever, 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 ever find them. Don't come back. You'll come forth. I held the last one longer than I should have. I had previously thought it to be a misspelling. I assumed Mr. Tomlinson had intended to write, "You'll come forth." But a new possibility popped into my head. When I returned to Google Maps once again, the last vestige of hope abandoned my body, and dread took its place. In the latest satellite image of Mr. Tomlinson's house, 3 T-shaped shadows painted the grass. I know who the third must be, but I'm still, 2 years later, too frightened to return and see for myself. Too frightened that I'll become the 4th shadow in the garden.